Good evening. It's evening right now where I am. Today's lecture is sort of going to open the door to the emergence of the two greatest empires of their time, the Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty or the Chinese Empire. We're going to start with Rome because we've been looking at the way that um, civilization has sort of sent forces into the Mediterranean and sort of created a series of reactions in which different groups have moved into the region, have gotten involved in commerce and trade, have begun settling around the Mediterranean Sea itself, with the purpose specifically of sort of engaging in commerce and trade with people who live in the interior, who have access to resources that are sort of highly desired by the members of um, the large scale societies in Mesopotamia and in Egypt that are sort of receptors for these kinds of things. And so we've seen that movement. We've seen the Phoenicians send out groups like the Carthaginians, the Romans, no, excuse me, the Greeks will arrive, begin the process of settling, replacing the Minoans on the island of Crete, develop their own trade networks, go into a period of decline between 1200 and 800, reemerge based on the infusion of new blood, new Greek speakers coming in, and so that after the year 800, we have a resurgence in Greek culture, a period of colonization and settlement where city-states send out groups that then establish new settlements in different areas, stay, build, create their own sort of alternative centers of civilization there, but are all part of a larger sort of network of a cultural network where they speak the same things. They see each other as kindred to a certain extent, right? And we see how this is going to build up to a resistance against the Persian Empire by Athens and Sparta and the other Greek city-states, ultimately leading to Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta, indeed, all of the Greek city-states come out of it exhausted by the bloodletting and the destruction of that, and suddenly find themselves confronting the superior forces of the Macedonians, who bring them in and become part of Alexander. Large parts of that part of the globe, right? They overturn the Persian Empire, conquer the Persian Empire, go further into, they've conquered Egypt, parts of the coast, right? And shortly thereafter, the death of Alexander sort of leads to a situation where the system breaks down. And indeed, the generals will each take one part of the conquered areas, and they will last for several centuries, right? And they will create their own internal dynasties, if you will. We're now looking at the rise of Rome. So Rome is going to become by far the most powerful empire of its time through what the text calls an unprecedented exercise of violence. They will create the largest armies and armies that have extreme systems of discipline and training. The text then goes into the factors that contributed to this achievement. In the broadest sense, the way the text is sort of its way of handling things is giving us the broad abstract overview at the start, and then sort of trying to give us a finer breakdown on the details. The first thing it mentions is the migration of foreign peoples into the whole southern European Mediterranean region. The Gauls, who had first appeared in parts of northern Europe, have now moved down into the south, into France, the coastal areas of France, go into Spain, and ultimately, around the year 400, they will penetrate into the Italian peninsula and ultimately arrive at the city of Rome around the year 390. And the Romans are in no position to fight off the Gauls. They will, however, buy them off. And so they give them a significant amount of gold and other treasures for the Gauls to take back with them. The Gauls will eventually, shortly after that, will indeed leave the Italian peninsula and go back north. There are issues about who's going to be the king of the Gauls and this kind of a thing, and so they leave to work out those kind of details and fight amongst themselves. But what they have done, which is critical for Rome, is they have effectively undermined the Etruscans. Who were the Etruscans? The Etruscans were a people who inhabited the Italian peninsula slightly to the north of Rome, and from the center of it, from what today is Florence, over to the western coast of the Italian peninsula, from which they made contact with other trading groups, the Greeks and the Carthaginians. Both will be trading with the Italian peninsula through the control of the Etruscans. The Romans then are one of several groups, what are called Latin speakers, because the language of Rome will be Latin, but they have cousin groups surrounding them who are also Latin speakers. And the Etruscans will sort of serve as the middleman between Romans and other groups who are trading with the outside world and who are taking a cut from what it is, so that the city of Rome, which is where Rome begins, is on the Tiber River runs through it, and there are 7 islands on the Tiber River that then constitute the core area of Rome itself. So we have a situation where we have an emergent ethnic group being tightly controlled by an external group that the Romans, this group that's being controlled, are at that point in time not strong enough to break free from the grasp of the Etruscans, completely free, and it will be the work of the Gauls who come down and militarily defeat the Etruscans, hence breaking the power of the Etruscan kingdoms, because they're sort of like city-state kingdoms, and open up the door, create what we would call a power vacuum. So the destructions of the destruction of the Etruscans by the Gauls at around the year 400, 410 through about 390 will open the doorway for Rome to begin to sort of organize itself for conquest. And when they do, they will then begin the process of expansion, first at the expense of their neighbors who are fellow Latin speakers. This will lead to something that I will refer to as the Roman game. Now, obviously, this is a point in time, but it's not the beginning of it. This is a point in time in which warfare, weapons of war, organizing armies, things like that, becomes increasingly a central aspect of the growth of civilization, and indeed Western civilization in this case. But when we go to China, we're going to see something very similar in China, right? That their the Chinese ability to, bring into the field of battle huge numbers of warriors with superior weapons will give them the firepower with which to conquer an immense area that becomes the heartland of the new Chinese empire that will literally stay the same, but over 2,000 years, right? Um, but it will vary at times and get smaller and larger depending on, for the Chinese, then the penetration of outside groups, reducing the amount of area that the center holds. Leave that for later lectures, right? So we're looking at the growth of the Roman legions. And the Roman legions will be tied to the development of a very, very strong war ethos. A war ethos that penetrates Roman society. And it is sort of based on the idea of the personal honor of the individual, but the family honor as well. The status of the family then is predicated on the status of their sons who fight in the legions, expanding and defending the Roman the Roman lands and the peoples that are brought in. So Rome will develop sort of a very, very efficient, as the text says, a very efficient killing system. The Roman legions, who will have extremely arduous, shall we say, systems of training and discipline, tied to incredible punishments. In one of the writings, Polybius, an historian of the time, describes what happens if an individual should fall asleep while on watch. And of course, I think you can understand the rationale behind it, right? Because if the Roman army is bivouacked out in the field and there are enemy forces out there and people are put into like foxhole kinds of situations where they're supposed to warn the people of an attack at night. And should they fall asleep, the punishment is death. Not only that, but should I, go to replace that individual because it's my turn, like the first 4 hours, it's his turn. I take the next 4 hours of watch, or 6 hours, right? Maybe 6 hours to get through a night, right? So the first 6 hours is one individual, from 10 to 4, and then I go from 4 to 10 the next morning. If I arrive and I find that individual sleeping, by law, by the laws that rule the actions of legionnaires and members of the Roman legions, I am obliged to report this individual to my superiors. They then will have something like a court-martial, and should that individual be found guilty, he will literally be clubbed to death by members of his own unit, which seems to be extremely harsh when you think about it. Yet on the other hand, I kind of understand it. Not only does it sort of impose that discipline on the group, that I sure as hell am not going to fall asleep when I'm on watch, right? Both for fear that the enemy might come in and slit my throat while I'm sleeping, but even more so that should they discover that I was sleeping, they'll kill me themselves, right? But also the fact that it is members of your own group who must beat you to death ties in very, very closely with the idea that if I fall asleep, I'm putting your life in danger. So you then have the responsibility of killing me for breaking the laws and making sure that no one else does it again. Now, when Rome begins this process and begins sort of looking around them at their neighbors, and as I said, their neighbors are sort of like cultural cousins. Their neighbors are Latin speakers like them, have the same religious ideas, customs, grow out of family experiences that are very, very similar to mine, right? Um, what Rome will develop is what I refer to as the Roman game. Essentially, it says um, if you lay down your sword, pledge allegiance to Rome, you are granted full citizenship in the Roman Republic, which is a sort of like a fascinating new game. In other words, other people, the Persians had been sort of moving in this direction. The Romans really solidify this way of thinking, right? The idea is if I offer you citizenship um, as a member of the Roman Republic, right, you will have all of the rights of anyone else. You will be completely covered by the laws of Rome, and you will have the same rights as anyone else to vote in the elections, to participate in civic events. Even though the fact that you had originally opposed Rome, once you lay down your arms and surrender to the Roman legions, you then join us. Now you join us completely. Um, in fact, um, the obviously, if you're a citizen, there are things that you receive, right? So, protection under the law, the right to vote, the right to move freely in society, the right to respect as a Roman citizen, no matter where you go inside Rome, the Roman Empire eventually. Um, what are the demands that we put on you? The first thing relates to the fact that we'll let you stay on your land. We're not going to drive you off your land, you know, make you homeless and poor and this kind of a thing. We want you to stay on your land, to continue to farm the land, because your produce, what you produce on the land, can be bought and sold in the markets to feed the growing population of Rome and the Roman countryside as well. So that's you have the land, right? But you must pay taxes on the land, right? But all citizens pay taxes, and there are no extraordinary taxes put on you as a conquered people. You pay the same taxes as other people do, and so you are truly a citizen of the Roman Empire, right? Of the Roman Republic initially, and then later of the empire. But the truly critical part of the game itself is um, you must hand over your sons to serve in the Roman legions. Now, remember what I was saying about the war ethos. The war ethos, in that sense of honor and participation in Rome, is actually going to sort of make families who, in the older order of things, would have either been slaughtered or sold into slavery. Those were the two options, shall we say, that a conquering horde would have. I conquer you, I can chop your head off, or I can enslave you, right? Okay. I can sell you as a slave. Rome then comes in with a totally different response, which rather than killing you, enslaving you, selling you into slavery, I'm going to make you a citizen, but with one important responsibility. your sons must serve. Now, effectively, what this does is create something like a recruitment weapon, a recruitment institution to bring new blood into it. Now, think about it. The way this works is the more you conquer, the more you incorporate people into Rome, um, the more people you have from which to draw for manpower in the army. So the bigger you get, the stronger you get. The more you can expand even more, bring more people in, and then offer them citizenship. And indeed, on the Italian peninsula, this works extremely well, such that by the year 265, so if around 390, something like that, the Roman legions start forming, and Rome starts sort of flexing its muscles at the expense of its neighbors. By 265, you know, 100 and what, 30 years later, something like that, 140, 130 years later, they have conquered the complete Italian peninsula, right? Um, and so they have now created what the textbook calls, and I think it's really kind of true, this snowball effect that as Rome rolls like that big, you form a snowball on the top of a hill and you push it, and it begins to sort of, as it rolls, it sort of picks up the snow that it rolls over, gets bigger, such that by the time a snowball that started this big on the top of the hill is big enough and the snow is right, it can be huge at the bottom of the hill because it's rolled. As it rolls, it picks up, and so by 265, Rome has become a truly powerful entity. It's still the Roman Republic, but it will now begin looking beyond the Italian peninsula. And it gets sucked into a war that is being fought on the island of Sicily, just off the boot of Italy itself. And Sicily was, together with Egypt, two of the sort of grain producing and exporting areas in the ancient world. And so Sicily was strategically important for the Romans, but also the Carthaginians, who have the city of Carthage just off of Tunis in Tunisia and in North Africa, and have sort of spread in different areas. They're a trading group. They emerged from the Phoenicians along the coast, right? And they get sucked into sort of a dispute between two neighboring cities, that have different histories and different peoples, and one is trying to conquer the other, and one appeals to the Carthaginians who come in, and the other one appeals to the Romans. At the start of this war, this is what is called the Punic Wars. There are three of them. At the start of this, which begins in 264, just after Rome has consolidated its control over the Italian peninsula, which certainly was first and foremost in the minds of the Romans. Once they've done that, they can look elsewhere. Historians are a little bit sort of unsure as to whether this was the Roman intent, or they sort of get sucked into it. One of the things that you have to understand, remember Athens and Sparta, who fight each other. Athens was a naval power. Sparta was a land power. Rome was a land power like Sparta, right, with massive armies that they could put into the field of battle. A chill, getting a bit chilly here, right? Okay. Rome doesn't have a navy, and they are able to recruit some Greeks who come in and help them build a navy. And ultimately, with the help of the navy that they create, they're able to defeat the Carthaginians and drive them out of that particular area, a couple of neighboring islands there as well, so that Rome now sort of controls an area to the west of it in the Mediterranean Sea there, with Sicily and I don't remember the name of the other couple of islands, but if I had a map, I could tell. In any case, once they have a navy and begin to get a taste for it, they begin to sort of flex their muscles, expand, and sort of move out into the Mediterranean, and will confront the the whole question of commerce and trade on the Mediterranean. And so they begin to grow and expand in that regard, right? They now become a true Mediterranean power. But Carthage still exists. They were driven out of Sicily, but Carthage is still a major powerhouse. And what Carthage has done is concentrate its efforts on Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, which is the source of major mineral possessions, iron and other kinds of metals and minerals that are of value to them. And they begin to settle along the coast of Spain and began moving up in the direction of southern France. And what will eventually happen is the continuous, you know, meetings and conflicts between Romans and Carthaginians in different cities and different places will ultimately lead to the decision of Hannibal. Hannibal is the son of the Carthaginian king. He's next in line. He's also the general in charge of the forces located in Spain. And he makes a decision. So that First Punic War went from 264 to 241, which seems to be a rather long time to fight a war. But at this point in time, Romans and others, Carthaginians and others, went to battle in the spring, that the weather had a major impact on them. So they wouldn't fight in the winter. They'd come back in the winter and, the soldiers would go back home and plant winter wheat and do things like that. And then Mars, the god of war, is what gives the name to our month of March. It's the first month of spring, and they start, gathering their forces together and march off again to fight. So you can understand why it would take a period of time. And the Romans at the start didn't have a navy, so to get a navy together it took them 3, 4, 5 years before they even had a navy. They could confront the Carthaginians on the island of Sicily to try and really get involved there. And so it takes, 23 years from 264 to 241. And it's all focused on the island of Sicily. Strategic, as I suggested, for grain harvest and things like that. There is a second Punic War that starts when Hannibal decides the only way that Carthage can free itself from the nightmare of a Rome that's growing and expanding and sort of continuously pushing Carthage more and more into a corner is to take the fight to them. And so he literally takes his army of 40,000 men at the start and gets down to 20,000 men, which is not much compared to what the Romans have. But he will take his army, a truly seasoned army, which also has elephants from Africa, war elephants, and they will actually go into Italy over the mountains in the north, lose a lot of the elephants, but they do manage to penetrate, and they start the Second Punic War, which will last from 218 to 201, 17 years, right? And it's lengthy because Hannibal is sort of out ravaging the countryside and going around the countryside and also trying to sort of win recruits from areas that have joined the Romans, right? This kind of a thing. And so, they will confront the Roman legions, indeed, um, you know, kill thousands of Roman soldiers, but Rome is drawing on millions of people. Carthage is a city state of maybe a million people. And so their army of 40,000 is their army. They have nothing back home. Well, there is another African army and this kind of thing. But, I mean, when you're drawing on a core population of a million plus people, it's hard to in any way match the ability of a place like Rome that's drawing on 20 million people, 30 million people, whatever it was at that particular point in time, and can put a million men into the field of battle, right? And they've got 20,000, so the odds are obviously stacked against the Carthaginians, but the Carthaginians under Hannibal, who is considered one of the, historically one of the sort of legendary generals that you go to West Point and you study about his tactics and things that he did. Ultimately, what the Romans decided to do is send an army into North Africa to attack his home base of Carthage itself. When that happens, and when word gets to Hannibal that his home city of Carthage is being attacked, he takes his men to the coast. They go there, and then they meet the army of Scipio Africanus, who defeats Hannibal in Africa, and then sort of literally imposes Roman control over the city of Carthage, which is to say now Rome is in complete control of the Western Mediterranean, and at that point in time begins to turn its efforts towards conquering the Greeks and others into the coastal areas, all the way into Egypt and around, so that by the end of it, by the time of Christ, Rome is a circum-Mediterranean powerhouse, right? This kind of a thing. In the year 150, Rome decides that Carthage could always be a source of rebellion in the future, and they literally make an executive decision to wipe it from the map, leaving no stone unturned. So they send an army in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, between 150 and 146. They literally decimate the population. They kill all the men. They sell the women and children into slavery to sort of remove any potential threat then of a future rebellion led indeed by. So let's look at the political institutions that they developed. Go back to the year 509. In the year 509, as we suggested, we didn't get into it, but in the year 509, which is considered the takeoff point for Rome as an independent entity, in the year 509, the Romans were controlled by a king. He was an Etruscan king, but he's not the Etruscan king because there are a lot of little kings, shall we say, in different strategic cities. You might, call them individual rulers, governors, this kind of a thing, right? But there is an event that occurs at that time when the son of the Etruscan king forces the daughter of an aristocratic Roman family, literally rapes, if you will, the daughter of an aristocratic Roman family. And the Romans revolt. And there's a hue and a cry. The young man who has done the act, nothing is done to him because he's the son of the king. And so the Roman citizens rise up and literally forcibly drive the king out. So they're in the situation of what do we do now, right? We don't have a king, we drove him out. And at that point in time, they develop a new system of government, which they refer to in Latin as res publica. Obviously, the source of our word republic, but go back to its original core meaning. Res means thing, publica means public. So, in other words, what they have done is they have replaced kingship, which, after all, makes government a private thing, where my will is law, says the king, right? And they have made government then a public thing. It belongs to the public. It's our thing, if you will, right? And so they will replace the private government of the king with a senate. Now, the Senate is very much an oligarchic institution, but it is a rather broad oligarchy. It represents the aristocratic founding families of Rome that numbers between 300 and 600 people at different points in time, right? And you become a member because you are the son of. My father is a member of the Senate. He dies. I take his place in the Senate. And so it is very much an aristocratic institution that reflects the will of the aristocracy, who are the sort of the elite families in Rome. And indeed, the Republic will be given, give or take some, will be effectively, and sometimes not so effectively, but effectively the government of Rome for the next 5 centuries. So the Republic will last about 500 years. There will be push from within because all of those people who are not members of the aristocracy feel very much second class citizens, and there is sort of give and take there. The lever that they have is the fact that their sons constitute the Roman legions, and Rome is an institution that rises or falls with its military, right? And so, to the extent that these families are well represented in the military, um, gives them sort of a leverage there, a bargaining chip, so that over time they force the Senate to sort of openly publish. There are these tablets that are put up that indicate the laws of the land, discrimination in courts, in marriages are removed, things like that. And perhaps most importantly, the positions of what are called councils to represent the common people. They are members of the Senate, so they are aristocrats, but they are sort of chosen by an assembly, a popular assembly, to represent the will of the common people to the Senate itself, right? And they are considered, again, given the amount of stuff that's going on there, they are considered important positions. Um, in any case, government policy as well as the rules of behavior issue ultimately from the Senate itself. It is the source of power in society, but it is a debating institution where individual members of the Senate will get up and discuss and debate different points of view. Um, Ultimately, there will be a third figure who appears here, the dictator, and it comes from again the Latin word dicta, what I dictate, right? In other words, what I say is the law, that whole idea of the king, but it is circumscribed and only for a short period of time to confront situations of crisis, right? When, for example, Hannibal penetrates the Italian peninsula and threatens Rome itself, right? We need someone with absolute authority to control events. And you choose a dictator for a period of 6 months. He can be replaced or he can be voted to continue. Um, and so these are the sort of political institutions that will remain as Rome begins to become a powerhouse in the Mediterranean, and after they conquer and destroy Carthage and begin sort of expanding into the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, into Palestine, into then down into Egypt and parts of North Africa, they will begin sort of um, acquiring land. So when they conquered Sicily, this is when it sort of first began to happen. Um, in Sicily, we begin to see the development of what in Latin was called the latifundium. And lati means wide or broad, a broad expanse, fundium of land. So a latifundio is a huge farm. Um, and suddenly the land of Sicily is increasingly being taken over by representatives of the aristocratic families in Rome. And they are going to be using slave labor on these plantations. And ultimately, they will bring this institution of the latifundium back to the Italian peninsula. And what is going to happen is that, as I mentioned before, right, at the start of the Roman game, you are left in charge of your land with the idea that you continue to farm your land and you bring your produce into the market so that you have a way and you can continue to sort of have your farm, have your family make some money, right? This kind of thing. But you send your sons off to war. Suddenly, they start arriving in the markets, and the price that was being, the price at which wheat and other commodities were being sold sort of had fallen immensely because people are using slave labor on these huge plantations to sell it. And so they begin undermining the free farmer class, these group of people who were working on the farms, but who were providing the sons to the Roman legions. And what's going to happen is they're going to go into bankruptcy, and they leave the land and start migrating to Rome. And Rome becomes a city with a huge surrounding area of slums as people begin arriving from the countryside. A phenomenon that we've seen in parts of Latin America, for example. In any case, there will be two, and the text does mention them, two brothers, aristocratic brothers, who look at what's happening and say, okay, what's needed is land reform. In other words, a ceiling placed on the absolute amount of land that any one individual can own. And then land will be taken away from those who have more than what, So if you can only own 500 acres and you own 10,000, well, 9,500 will be taken away from you and distributed amongst the people. These are the Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, and they are ultimately concerned with the viability of the Roman experiment because they realize that this process of concentrating wealth, in the hands of the elite families may undermine the ability of the Roman legions to continue to recruit young men. And so their concern is precisely that this situation will ultimately undermine what is the basis of Roman strength. It's Roman legions. It's free folk who farm the land and send their strong young sons off to fight in the legions. Now the recruiters are arriving there, and there's no one there to recruit. And when they get there, it's all slave labor. And as someone who answers to one of the senators who is wealthy and and living in luxury in Rome and this kind of a thing, and of course, what happens when you oppose the powerful in this kind of a situation? Um, they will both be assassinated, and they're sort of like object lessons, right? You know, you can't just simply oppose the will of the wealthy and the powerful, right? Land reform is undermined, they are assassinated, and the ultimate kickback is citizens lose respect in the institutions of government. We have some of that debate going on in this society today, and it's been going on for a while, right? And so um, we face a similar kind of a dilemma. Um, you know, if we don't trust the results the um, of the elections, if we think that the Supreme Court has been politicized, right? If if we believe that incumbents in power in Congress are controlling elections so that they don't really have to stand up to scrutiny and things like that, and citizens lose faith in the institutions of government, um, it can be a very, very dangerous thing. In Rome at this particular point in time, as people stop looking to, say, the Senate or the councils for assistance and help with the crisis that they're facing, they turn to the generals as the new power brokers in societies who then become sort of um, popularists and claim that they will help the people, right? Out of this will come a series of civil wars as generals compete to control um, the Rome itself, to gain power in Rome itself. And these civil wars really threaten with destroying Roman society at a point in time where it seems to have come to a point where it had truly succeeded and gotten wealthy and powerful, and yet the internal forces of society may well be moving to tear it apart. Um, in our next lecture, we'll try and see how Rome is able to confront these and continue to survive. Are you still